Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Mr. Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm Larry Pope, Associate Coordinator for Counterterrorism at the State Department. On August 1st, Peter Burley submitted a prepared written statement for the record, and his statement summarized the links between BCCI and terrorism as follows. In 1986, the intelligence community developed and disseminated information that linked the Abu Nidal organization and its activities to a BCCI branch in Europe through the use of front companies. The ANO traded profitably.
What's the date on that again? I'm sorry.
1986, sir.
1986.
The ANO, on August 1st,
shares or certificates in countries around the world, narcotics money laundering for several years, and have indicated that awareness in our reports to Congress. Working with officials at Justice and Treasury, we have formulated recommendations for the Financial Action Task Force and other multilateral organizations, as well as for use in our bilateral negotiations with other financial center countries on cooperative countermeasures. We have made important progress in the last few years, but there is a lot more to be done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Mr. Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm Larry Pope, Associate Coordinator for Counterterrorism at the State Department. On August 1st, Peter Burley submitted a prepared written statement for the record, and his statement summarized the links between BCCI and terrorism as follows. In 1986, the intelligence community developed and disseminated information that linked the Abu Nidal organization and its activities to a BCCI branch in Europe through the use of front companies. The ANO traded profitably.
What's the date on that again? I'm sorry.
1986, sir.
1986.
The ANO traded profitably and successfully in weapons, construction services, and other business enterprises. Based on the information developed by the intelligence community, we launched a major diplomatic effort to have the concerned governments, which included the previous communist regimes in East Germany as well as Poland, expel the ANO personnel responsible for these businesses and close down the companies themselves. The efforts we made with other governments to disrupt the ANO's commercial activities were successful. The business front companies that financed a major portion of ANO's activities have been shut down. Since the August 1st hearing, the full report prepared in 1987 on the ANO front companies, on which Mr. Burley's statement was based, has been declassified. Copies of that report have been provided to subcommittee staff. We have continued to review the available information with regard to BCCI's connections to international terrorism. We have not uncovered any information indicating that the ANO or any other terrorist group received financial backing from BCCI. In a few instances, terrorist groups other than the ANO and one state sponsor of terrorism maintained accounts with BCCI branches. I regret that I'm unable to be more specific in a public hearing. Mr. Chairman, at the request of the committee staff, we have also looked into the allegations which have been made in the press about Mr. Mohammed Hammoud, a Lebanese businessman and shareholder in BCCI who died last year, with regard to his possible links to terrorist groups like Hezbollah. We do not have information which would support these allegations. The committee staff has also asked about a possible connection of the Qassar brothers to BCCI. Mundhir and Ghassan Qassar have been notorious for their involvement in an arms and narcotics smuggling network which has provided revenue for the operation of several terrorist groups, including the Abu Nidal organization. The white paper, which we have made available to the committee, discusses their activities in detail and their close connection to the business activities of the ANO, which we worked successfully to break up. We also know that the ANO had a banking relationship with BCCI, but we are not aware of evidence linking the Qassar brothers to BCCI directly, although this is plausible given their connections to the ANO. As investigation into BCCI affairs by appropriate law enforcement agencies here and overseas continues, we may learn more. We will continue to follow up any leads aggressively from the counterterrorism point of view. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Let me begin, if I can. Well, let me sort of run across the board here. First reports of the State Department on terrorism were 1986.
First reports of the connection between BCCI and the Abu Nidal organizations.
Were 1986.
That's correct, sir.
And drug involvement, money laundering, first knowledge?
Actually, first knowledge was in 1987 from an investigation which was then underway and which was mentioned in our 1988 report without giving the name of the bank. We were able in the 1989 report to mention BCCI specifically.
Well, that was publicly, but you had no other knowledge of their involvement in money laundering or drug activities prior to that?
We would have,
even with the existence of 5 or so branches in Medellin?
we would have seen the earlier reports, but the specific details were provided by the investigations which were underway in 1987, which began in 1987.
So you relied on the law enforcement investigations for your knowledge? You
That was the
didn't gain
primary
it,
source of our knowledge, yes.
you didn't gain it through State Department personnel in Colombia?
No, sir.
You didn't gain it from State Department personnel in Panama? Or any other Latin American country?
No, sir.
There are no reports, no cables, no information whatsoever in the State Department about banks' involvement in money laundering prior to that?
I believe we've done a complete search of our files, and this is what we've come up with, sir.
Now,
We can check again if you wish, but we have.
well, if you're convinced you've
Conducted
done
a
a
search.
complete search, I don't want you to, I mean, if you've done a complete search and I see heads nodding, I take it at face value that that's when you had your first reports.